sculpture is no different than working in any other medium, regardless of the material. It's periods of working and doing, and then taking a minute to evaluate where you're at and make some decisions about the next steps. So overall, I think we're doing okay here. I think the placement of everything is working. The overall shape of the face is coming together. Again, that armature is a little bit distorted, so it's leading to a bit of an elongated face. I'll continue to work on that. So I'm trying to keep in mind that even though the face is there's symmetry in the face and the structure, so the skull is symmetrical, the fat pads, the muscles, they're built in pairs, they're symmetry, but the face and the human body functions on something we often refer to as dynamic symmetry, where there's changes and there's shifts in that symmetry. There's the overall symmetry, but it's not mirror image. So because of this expression, because that lip pulls up, this cheek fat pad pulls up, the eye changes and the nose shifts. I'm trying to keep that in mind. So I will continue to work on the face. I'm happy with where it's going. I think the nose is fine for now. Brows are probably okay. This eye over here, if we look at our reference photo, and I've pulled the reference photos off because at this point in the sculpture I do like to have them be able to hold them right up beside the sculpture. I think we've got room to close this eye a little bit more, again because of the way the face stretches and compresses. This eye can stay open. I think the shape is okay here. This maybe we can close up a little bit more, droop that lid a little bit. So that's one of the adjustments I'll look at in the near future. And I also think I've got this mouth pulled too far this way. If we look at where the corner of the mouth typically lines up with the kind of middle of the eye, where the pupil would be if the figure was looking straight forward. So that side's okay. This side I feel like the mouth is just a little bit pulled that way a bit much. So I want to keep the shape, but I think I need to pull it in a little bit, just so there's not as much as much teeth showing. It's not over as far, which means I probably have to adjust this cheek as well. I want it to be snarled up like this, but I don't want it to seem like it's abnormally stretched this way, like there's a hook pulling it. And then the last thing I will work on is the profile. So I think if I kind of turn it like that, this profile in here, so if you kind of look at that negative space, I think I want the chin can be just a little rounder here, and I think we can have a little bit more of a shelf where the lips is flat here on top and sticks out. It's a little bit, this is just a little bit too regular here. So those are the adjustments I'll make. I'm not going to go terribly far on the back of the head. Once we get the ears on, I might do a little bit more. So a little bit on the profile, chin and lip, the comparison of the two eyes, and certainly the mouth is what I will attack first. in some ways it might look like we've actually got farther away in the last hour rather than closer to being finished. And you have to get used to going through periods like that. So the way that I like to work with monster clay is to use it fairly soft, and so I will overbuild these sections. So this cheek is obviously overbuilt. I'm letting, notice that I smoothed some of the wrinkles or some of the pieces out as I was attaching them, blending them in. These I'm going to let cool down, and as monster clay cools down, gets closer to room temperature, it becomes firmer and it'll be easier to shape. But I wanted to leave, these wrinkles and these different folds intact until I can kind of rake them together rather than just smushing them together when the clay is really soft. I'll also have to shape this. When we look here, this nasolabial fold too dense in here, but I'd rather be able to shave it off. Happier with the chin, and I did move the mouth over significantly, which made me build up this fold quite a bit. So I do need to resculpt in here a little bit. So I'm going to let that cool, firm up a little bit. Then I will shape it with the large rakes and then smaller rakes. And then after that, it's really, it's just going through that same process again, but making smaller and smaller refinements. Unless I get to the point at some point where I think, man, I kind of lost the thread there. I really need to adjust it. And at that point, you have to decide: are you happy with good enough, or do you want it to look the way you want it to look? Now, if you're working on a project that's not yours, and in terms of you're not calling the shots, and often as a concept artist, you only have so much time. So if somebody else tells you, that's in charge, says that's good enough, then it's good enough. But when you're working on your own and when you're learning in particular, and that's what we're doing here, we're not making a commercial piece. You make it right, and the more that you do that, the faster and more efficient you'll be. So in the future, you'll be able to get to a place where it's more right, or closer to being right, sooner. Okay, so again, overbuilt, particularly in this pad here, intentionally, so I can reshape that. So that's where I'll go next. So did quite a bit of raking. I've got this cheek pad in a pretty good spot. This eye starting to come together with the kind of the wrinkles and the compression that happens from the curled lip. Overall shape of the lip is getting better. I did add quite a bit of mass down here, and what I'll do is I'll make the joint kind of between top lip and bottom lip here. So I do need to do quite a bit of work sculpting that. You can see from the profile it sticks out quite a bit, but just just thought I would curve that lip up into that curl. It just really started to feel distorted in here, so been struggling with that a little bit, obviously, keep going back to it, but it's getting closer, and that's what we want. Shaved this brow down a little bit, and might have been hard to see in the time lapse, but I did add quite a bit of material in here, some of these neck muscles, and I did just add some more material. I just slapped on those ears, mapped out where they should be, kind of how they should sit. This one's sitting a little too up and down. I'm not sure why I'm even bothering. These aren't going to be the finished ears, but at least they're on there, and as placeholders for now. Happier with the chin. So again, it'll just be a series of going in and sculpting this a little bit, letting all these forms and additions cool a bit, let some of this cool down, firm up a bit, and then rake it all together, and then just keep going. So it's really just another 100 hours of doing that. Adding material, making some refinements, raking it together. So we'll just keep going on that, and then we will relatively soon we'll get into, once we have the forms where we want them, we'll get into smoothing it down so there's fewer of these tool marks, and then adding in the final texture and detail. And I'll do a relatively involved demo, a fairly thorough demo on adding the texture, wrinkles, etc. So ignoring the temporary ears, made some good progress, I think. Overall, the skull, cranium, starting to make a little more sense. Some of these muscles, again, kind of over defining them for now. Probably pull them back a little bit. Do a little more work here, where because the head turns, there's obviously a lot of compression here, and so that seems a little bit thin. So probably work on that side, this side first, build up some more mass where the as everything twists together, it compresses, and then I'll decide how stretched I want this. That might be nice contrast to bulk this up and kind of exaggerate this. I'm not really going to sculpt anything below the clavicle. A little more progress on the eye. I think I've got generally what I want in terms of this one being scrunched up and this one being a little wider. Again, it's a little bit exaggerated. Also consider a bit of a breakthrough on the mouth. I was really struggling with it. And sometimes you can just look at something for hours and it doesn't make sense. So previously I had, material filling in here, and it dawned on me that the lips, they need to wrap around the teeth. They don't come straight across. So cutting this bottom lip in and the top lip curl and cutting that in so that the profile makes more sense here against that cheek and over here. So again, it's exaggerated. The mouth is quite wide. The teeth are big. We know that, but it still has to be rooted in accurate anatomy. So now if we look at the opening, much better where we've compressed it and also pushed back the joint. I think it's probably okay on this side. If anything, I could, now that I'm looking at it, might just shave it in a bit, again, just to get that mouth curving back in. So I think I'll just make a note and just make those marks on there, and that will remind me that I was thinking of just pulling that in again, because now that I look here, need more of a, you know, a mouth that's shaped like this, right? Like a crescent shape and less straight across. So typically that's the way it goes. You make one adjustment, pat yourself on the back, and then you notice the next thing. Probably need to beef up this a little bit here too. There's a strange indentation. So I think do this first and then sculpt this cheek in. Again, I don't want it as puffy as this one because this everything's being pulled up here from the mouth. And we looked at that right at that in that initial drawing. So sculpt these lips on this side a little bit, and then deal with that cheek. I think the next video, what I'm going to do is to work on the ears, and it might take a slightly different approach, just to throw in something different, particularly for my students. That why I started this whole thing. We didn't really get to talk about life casting, and so because this is a 1-to-1 scale, a life-size figure, I'll do a quick and dirty demo on some life casting. And so I'll cast a couple ears from life, and then maybe we'll use those. We won't just stick them on. Maybe we'll sculpt something a little exaggerated from them. We'll see how it goes, but be able to incorporate some life casting into the next demo.